Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to explore one of the most chilling true stories in recent memory. Picture a perfectly idyllic town, Westfield, New Jersey, and one specific address that would soon become infamous, 657 Boulevard. It's the story of a $1 million home purchase that was meant to be the ultimate milestone of success for a family, but actually, it rapidly twisted into a waking American nightmare.
So imagine this. What happens when your dream home comes with an anonymous, generational stalker? For Derek and Maria Broaddus, this wasn't just some hypothetical horror movie plot. It became their very real, horrifying reality. You see, the entire premise of homeownership is built on safety, comfort, and building a bright future, right? The Broaddus family thought they were buying into that warm, idyllic American dream. But as you'll see, that hopeful tone was completely shattered by an invisible darkness they literally never could have anticipated.
Let's talk about the stakes here for a second, because they were incredibly high. $1.3 million. That is the massive financial investment the Broaddus family made. They weren't just buying a little starter home. 657 Boulevard was a sprawling, century-old property. It was supposed to be their forever home, a place to raise their young children and build decades of memories. The sheer emotional and financial weight of this 2014 purchase makes what happened next just so much more devastating.
And this brilliantly illustrates just how rapidly their excitement turned to absolute dread. The timeline is staggering. Week 1, June 2014, they close on this magnificent house, popping champagne, celebrating their future. Week 2, they begin extensive renovations to make the space perfectly their own. But by week 3, bam, they receive the very first letter. Just days after finalizing one of the biggest decisions of their lives, their hard-earned sense of security was totally hijacked.
Now, the disturbing letters actually started out friendly enough, almost like a quirky, slightly eccentric welcome from a neighbor, but they rapidly escalated into overt hostility and a really deep, invasive breach of privacy. Signed with an alias that would soon haunt them forever, The Watcher, the writer totally shifted the tone, claiming a sinister, long-standing connection to 657 Boulevard. They literally pivoted from welcoming to incredibly intrusive in just a matter of sentences.
I want to read you this exact quote from that correspondence because it's absolutely chilling. The anonymous author claimed they had been tasked with keeping watch over the house for decades. Think about the terrifying gravity of that statement for a second. This wasn't just some random prankster pulling a stunt. This was someone claiming a generational duty to monitor the property and, by extension, whoever lived inside it. It implies a dark history, a deep obsession, and this unseen presence that had supposedly been lingering there long before the Broaddus family ever got the keys.
But the hostile correspondence didn't stop at vague historical claims. Oh no, it grew incredibly specific and incredibly threatening. The stalker wrote, "Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I asked for? Better for me." Honestly, it is hard to overstate the horror of reading those words as a parent. The Watcher specifically escalated the hostility by explicitly mentioning the homeowner's young children, referring to them as young blood. It's a horrific, direct quote that completely changed the nature of the threat from just unsettling to deeply, deeply dangerous.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the terrifying contrast it shows. On one hand, you have innocent children playing safely on an enclosed porch, something the Broaddus kids actually did, genuinely believing they were shielded by the solid walls of their new home. On the other hand, you have an invisible stalker tracking the family's movements using an intimate knowledge of the interior floor plan. The Watchers sent notes vividly detailing the layout, explicitly stating they could watch and track the family as they moved from room to room. That false sense of security they felt, it was entirely an illusion. As you'd expect, the psychological toll on the Broaddus family was immediate. They were completely paralyzed by fear. I mean, when an anonymous stalker demonstrates that they know exactly how you move through your own private spaces, it totally shatters your most basic human expectation of safety inside your own walls. The sanctuary of their dream residence had been violated before they even unpacked all their boxes. Which leads us to a truly tragic, staggering reality. 0. The Broaddus family spent exactly 0 nights in their $1.3 million dream residence. Not a single one. The overwhelming terror, the psychological torment of these disturbing letters, and the constant creeping feeling of being watched prevented them from ever moving in. They officially owned this beautiful, sprawling, century-old property, but the invisible threat made it completely uninhabitable for them. Let's move to the next part of the story and see how this builds. Because the family didn't just sit back and take it. They fought to reclaim their peace of mind, launching an exhaustive hunt for the perpetrator. But despite a massive response from authorities, the investigation eventually hit a complete dead end. The desperation to find out who was behind these letters
led to one of the most intense local investigations you can possibly imagine, pulling in everyone they could.
Just look at the sheer volume of investigative resources deployed here. We aren't just talking about a couple of patrol officers taking a report and filing it away. We're talking local police. They hired private investigators out of their own pocket. They brought in a forensic linguist to analyze the syntax and vocabulary of the letters. They conducted DNA testing on the envelopes. They even utilized advanced handwriting analysis. Literally every professional resource you can think of was thrown at catching the Watcher.
Yet despite all of those advanced forensics and expert help from law enforcement and private investigators, there were no definitive matches. Zero. The identity of the person behind these threats was never discovered. It is an incredibly frustrating anticlimax to such an intense, high-stakes investigation. The DNA led nowhere. The handwriting analysis yielded no concrete suspects. To this day, the chilling case of the Watcher remains one of our most unsettling, unsolved mysteries, leaving a permanent dark question mark hanging right over 657 Boulevard.
The aftermath of this unsolved mystery was just massive. It didn't just stay a quirky local secret, it made national headlines, capturing the entire country's attention. Locally, the story spread like wildfire and prompted widespread community suspicion, infecting the town of Westfield with paranoia as neighbors started side-eyeing each other, wondering who among them could be the generational stalker. It even inspired a massive pop culture phenomenon. But at its core, for the Broaddus family, it resulted in an unsolved psychological torment that they just had to carry with them.
If you want to dive deeper and continue investigating the chilling details of this correspondence for yourself, there are a couple of definitive places you should look. You can read New York Magazine's excellent article, The Haunting of a Dream House, which breaks down the horror beautifully, or you can check out the official Wikipedia entry on the Watcher of Westfield to trace the entire timeline of the investigation and the endless clues that ultimately led nowhere. So the crucial point is this: our homes are supposed to be our ultimate safe havens. It's the one place in the world where we can shut the door, lock out the darkness, and finally relax. But if an invisible watcher knew the exact layout of your safe haven, if they knew exactly which enclosed porch your family was sitting on, would you ever sleep soundly again? It's a deeply unsettling thought to leave you with, bridging this terrifying source material directly to our own basic sense of security. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and stay curious.